Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this opportunity to debate this issue, and I'm glad to hear members of most parties pushing for this bill to be as strong as it possibly can be for communities across Scotland. Being a Highlander, land reform is an area of policy I feel a great deal of emotion about. Our land is emotive, and it's been too often misunderstood, misused and misappropriated. Now, the impact of the clearances is still very much visible and tangible in so many of the communities that I represent, not just because there are no homes where there could be or thriving communities where there should be, but because awful Cumberland-esque attitudes towards our communities and the land that we live and work on are still frequently displayed. Back in 2021, I spoke in a members' business debate brought by Roddick on the emergence of green lairds, and ever since, I'm sure that she, like me, has continued to get Google alerts and read in the local newspaper about further instances of this. The reaction to the brewdogs of this world coming in and buying up bits of the Highlands to kill trees on and parading this fact around as if it's something to be proud of has, I'm pleased to say, frequently been one of derision, dismay and disgust. But there remains a pervasive attitude that the Highlands is a wilderness available for the richest urbanites to purchase and do with as they please, because whatever cause they want it to serve is obviously going to be better than whatever the Highlanders want to do with it. Land ownership in Scotland has been far too concentrated for far too long, and that is getting worse, not better. As many have pointed out, 421 landowners own 50% of private rural land, and that's in the context of 57% of Scotland's rural land being privately owned. Now, this is wrong. It's not serving communities, culture or the climate. We need more diverse land ownership. Andy Whiteman points out that many of those landowners responsible for this figure will not be caught by provisions in the bill because their portfolio is not contiguous. Now, currently, that can be the case if somebody owns multiple holdings slightly under the limit across Scotland, or if what is essentially one holding is split up by a railway line. It is not any better for somebody to own lots of little bits of land across the country than one big holding, and I agree with Community Land Scotland and others that the contiguous requirement for hitting significance thresholds should be removed. Now, we're not short of examples of community land ownership proving a success. The Cabinet Secretary mentioned Egg, which was purchased by Islanders in 1997, just before I was born, after years of suffering at the hands of absentee landlords, and it now continues to go from strength to strength. And it's worth noting, I think, that it was another community buyout in the Highlands, the North Assynt Crofters, which drove the people of Egg forward in their plans. It was not easy, and it's a story worth looking into for many reasons, but the push from communities and the support that they required from the public sector to do so contains lessons for us today. And we can also learn from places like Egg about the potential in the relationship between community ownership and depopulation. So often when people speak about their decisions to leave the Highlands and Islands, they refer, even if not in explicit language, to a feeling of disempowerment, an inability to impact how the land around them is used, and an awareness that decisions about that are out of their hands and instead available to the highest bidder to make. But Egg went from being home to around 60 people in the 90s to over 100 27 years later. The community knows what it needs better than anyone else, and that shows. The Highlands and Islands hold so many similar examples of community buyouts and their success. 97% of community-owned land is situated in the Highlands and Islands. And that's not because it's something that's easy to do in my region, or that the Central Belt can't or shouldn't make use of community empowerment. It can and it should. But it is necessary for the future of Highlands and Island communities. This righting of wrongs and the rebalancing of power is needed if we want people to stay and be productive in these areas. So I welcome any steps forward in land reform in Scotland, but we should be doing as much as we can with the opportunities that we have. People keep voting for the SNP, a party which says it's going to do great things on community land ownership, so we should do those things wherever possible. So while I completely back the general principles of this bill, as I would any of the previous land reform bills, I hope that by the time we're looking at stage 3, it is stronger. Some should really be easy wins, like lowering the land size thresholds to 500 hectares for land management plans and registrations of interest, as the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee has recommended. And again, as recommended by committee, there must be a clear public interest test on the face of the bill, and the role of public interest in decision-making around lotting must be explicit. Fines of £5,000, as many have mentioned, are not enough to disincentivise breaching the requirements of a land management plan, especially when some are arguing that creating the plan will cost more than that. Now, a land reform bill next session seems as inevitable as ever, but let's do what we can with the last year that we have of this Parliament to put power in the hands of communities in the Highlands and Islands and across Scotland. These communities have shown incredible resilience in the face of decades of inequality, and sometimes they are successful in purchasing and making better use of their land, but not often enough. Land reform should be about recognising, rewarding and empowering that resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Roddick. And I call on Mercedes Vialba, the final speaker in the open debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Land is a public good.